but I did not realize that Larry Chambers and I were both appointed to the Naval Academy by Congressman William Dawson, both for very similar reasons. I from South Carolina and him from Virginia. But after coming here, after wanting to be here since the age of 12, I arrived and I hated it. Mike Mullen, you're laughing. It was hard. I love the weather. That's the only thing I like. Coming from South Carolina, I like the heat and humidity and the sweat and stuff. But I hated everything else about it. And my roommates, Mike O'Neill, Chuck Hickey, Ivan Larsh, the rest of us, I think I put on a good show, but they would catch me periodically under my desk crying. And they knew that on the weekends, when we finally got an opportunity to go to make a phone call, I'd call my mom and dad and I'd say, look, I made a mistake. I made a big mistake. I want to come home. And my father, who had been my high school football coach, said the same thing every single week I called for 52 weeks. Hang in there one more week. And I said, I don't want to be here. He said, hang in there one more week. So he was a very wise man. When my son Shay, who is sitting over here in the class of 93, came against my best advice, he hated it. And he struggled. And he called, and I did not have the heart to say, hang in there one more week. For him, I said, when you hang this phone up, go back to the company area, find somebody who's having a tougher time than you are, and help them get through one more week. It worked. He graduated, and he's now a colonel in the Marine Corps, and we're incredibly proud of him. He now has 3 daughters, as I mentioned, and the middle one, Kira, also like Connor, wants to come here. At least that was her story to me a few days ago, so hopefully she's still persisting. She wants to come because she's a great soccer player, and she wants to play football at the Naval Academy and be a kicker. So I've now put 2 prospective midshipmen on the spot. You know, let me get off the stage here, but before I do, a few pieces of, I won't call it advice, but I'll just say a few pieces of wisdom that I learned here. I learned around my mom and dad's dinner table, and I kept learning it over and over and over, whether it was here at the Naval Academy or at basic school as a Marine or at NASA. And one of them would be, listen to the chief and listen to the gunny. We made one incredible decision. I see Admiral Tom Lynch sitting down there, and I thank him for bringing me back to the Naval Academy. He called me when I was in training for my last space shuttle mission, and he said, hey, Charlie, this is Tom Lynch. I'm kind of paraphrasing, I think. And he asked me a question that my wife had asked me a few weeks earlier. He said, what are you going to do when you grow up? And I said, Admiral, I really hadn't thought about that, but it's ironic you asked me that question because my wife and family asked me the same thing. I said, you got anything in mind? And he said, well, I'd like to get you to come here to be the Deputy Commandant of Midshipmen to replace Terry Murray, who the Marine Corps promoted out of the job. And so I said, I'll work on it and talk to the Commandant of the Marine Corps, and he said that'd be a good idea. And I asked Admiral Lynch what I should do. He said, go fly, and then we'll take care of the rest of it. And it was one of the best things that ever happened to me because it allowed me to come back home here, become the Deputy Commandant of Midshipmen, and begin to relearn about our service, our country, how difficult it was to get through this place, but how important teamwork was. We had brought in the first group of senior enlisted advisors after one of the largest cheating scandals in the history of the Naval Academy, and boy, was that a huge, huge step for the Naval Academy, because we put senior enlisted right here in the hall where young midshipmen could go to an enlisted person and say, what are the troops going to expect of me on my first day on the ship? Or what are the Marines going to expect of me on my first day in the field? And that was something that I think we will look back on, and it will be one of the greatest things we ever did here. Back in the FMF, I always went to Sergeant Major Don Franklin, my very first Sergeant Major when I had the 3rd Marine Aircraft Wing, or Sergeant Major John Estrada, who later became the Sergeant Major of the Marine Corps, and then Ambassador to Trinidad and Tobago. But they were fonts of wisdom for me. So I highly